Well, I had a general interest in the South when I first decided to do this thesis, and I had done a junior thesis on Huey Long, and I wanted a comparable Southern figure with some kind of visibility or flamboyance. And I went down to Alabama to write about George Wallace.
When was this? What year?
This was in '76. And I got down there and found out that the man who was really running the state and all the important legislative and executive institutions was a federal judge named Frank Johnson. Well, there's a lot of people in Alabama, and George Wallace certainly is. He's had a great effect on, I think, the entire South and on the civil rights movement in this country in general. I spent about a month walking little sections of this creek, and I found about 24 different polluters. I photographed them. I sat by pipes all night long. I'd bring a lawn chair and sit next to a pipe waiting for it to discharge. I took samples. I got analysis done. And I then brought lawsuits on behalf of the fishermen against all 24 polluters. And that started me, during that process, the fishermen, which is now the Riverkeeper, asked me to come and work for them as their full-time attorney.
Law. Why'd you go into that?
You know that I was always interested in the environment from when I was a baby. I mean, I had racing pigeons by the time I was 7. I've been training hawks since I was 11 years old. The increasing availability of organically grown or non-pesticide treated products in supermarkets and specialty stores has shown that real environmental stewardship is possible. I was 12 years old when my father went to South Africa in 1966, and I remember the trip well, and the person who invited him on the trip was jailed and banned, as were many of the other organizers. I work for NRDC, for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and we are here to kick off the 25th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, which has been one of our most successful and important environmental statutes. I've been disciplined over 20 years as an environmental advocate about being nonpartisan and bipartisan in my approach to these issues. I don't think there's any such thing as Republican children or Democratic children. I think the worst thing that could happen to the environment is if it becomes the province of a single political party. But you can't speak honestly about the environment in any context today without speaking critically of this president. I was asked by... I've been an environmental advocate for 21 years. I work for Natural Resource Defense Council, and I also work for Riverkeeper. And I do a lot of writing on the environment. About a year ago, Jan Wenner, who's the publisher of Rolling Stone magazine, asked me to do an article laying out George Bush's environmental record for Rolling Stone. The article was published in December of last year, and it caused a lot of controversy, and about 3 weeks later, HarperCollins asked me to turn it into a book. It gave me basically until March to do it. Mountaintop removal over the past 8 years, these companies have flattened an area of the Appalachian, 1.4 million acres, an area larger than the state of Delaware. They've cut down 500 of the biggest mountains in West Virginia and buried permanently, forever, 2,000 miles of America's rivers and streams, according to EPA. Well, you know, for 27 years, I've been an environmental advocate for 27 years, and for 27 years I've had the same answer to that question, which is free market capitalism. People say to me, what's the most important environmental law that we could pass? And I would say, I've always said the same thing. It's free market capitalism, because in a true free market promotes efficiency, and efficiency means the elimination of waste, and pollution is waste. And a true free market would encourage us to properly value our natural resources, and it is the undervaluation of those resources that causes us to use them wastefully. I got dragged into the vaccine issue kind of kicking and screaming because I was going around the country suing coal-burning power plants and talking about the dangers of mercury coming from those plants. And almost everywhere I stopped or I spoke, there were women there, very eloquent, articulate, grounded people who were saying, look, you have to look at the biggest vector of mercury in American children now is coming from vaccines, and we need you to look at the science. And I resisted for a long time, but I started reading the science after a while. It's hard to say what's happening now in our country. I think You know, it's all there. Many people have this kind of atavistic urge for a leader who is kind of a man on horseback, who's decisive, who's violent, and who can point fingers at people, and that always has an attraction to a certain segment of the population. I'm not a doctor, but mercury is dangerous, and I did have very dangerous levels of mercury, and I got them chelated out. And people can do that. I used two things. One was called DMSA and the other was called alpha-lipoic acid. And then you have to take those with a lot of minerals and vitamins because they tend to deplete other, good minerals in your body that you want to keep. So you do it for short periods and interspersed, and I had no side effect. Gardasil is probably the single worst mass vaccine that we've ever seen. The senior scientist at CDC today, the senior vaccine safety scientist, he's still at CDC, he was the senior scientist there for 18 years. He is the author or co-author on all of the major studies that CDC has produced on vaccine safety, and particularly the studies that show the vaccine does not cause autism. His name is Dr. William Thompson. 3 years ago, he came forward and he said, we have been ordered to fake all the science. I never suspected I had a vaccine injury. And then 3 years ago, I got this disease, I got this injury in 1996. 3 years ago, I was preparing a lawsuit against the flu shot companies. And I had to go into their manufacturer's inserts where they have a list of all the listed side effects, proven side effects, or suspected side effects. Mm-hmm. And I saw that on almost all of them, that this disease, spasmodic dystonia, was one of the side effects. And I used to get a flu shot every year. And for the first time, I thought, oh, my God, because whenever I went to a doctor about this disease, they'd always said, did you have a trauma in 1996 that caused this? And I was like, my life is a trauma. I don't know how to, I can't think of anything particular that happened that year. Mm-hmm. But then when I read these studies, I thought, oh my gosh, this is one of the listed side effects, one of the top side effects, and that maybe this could be. There's no way to prove it. There's no way to prove it one way or the other, but it's a possibility, and ironically, that this may also be a vaccine injury. What I've said is vaccines, I'm not anti-vaccine. I think vaccines should be subject to the same level of rigorous testing as other medications. And that is the only thing, my only position. Listen, I fought to get mercury out of fish for 40 years, and nobody called me anti-fish. I'm not anti-vaccines just because I want safe vaccines. And I think everybody wants safe vaccines. And as we all now recognize, the COVID vaccines were neither safe nor effective.